Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you had a good lunch and a good morning with the rest of the program that's been going on today. I think this session is going to be one that is very informative. And the format for today is one where we have an introduction of ourselves, and then we have a discussion period about what we feel is important about GWACs and MACs, and then we're going to open it up. I like to open it up so that we can have about anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, really, of just real good discussion. Because I like to come to conferences and seminars and forums and learn something. And sometimes I think that if we give you nothing more than just what's on our mind, yeah, you can learn something, but I like to talk specifically and address some of the things that you guys have been thinking about during that time. And so, as far as the introduction is concerned, I'll start off and then let it go down with Jim Tierney and Major General Proctor. And what we will do then is I'll come back and then open it up a little bit about the discussion about the MACs and GWACs and why I think it's important to small business. You know, I didn't pick this topic for this panel because I think it's fun. I picked it because I think it's critical today. So it's important that we all get an understanding of what they are, why we are where we are, and how do you leverage it? How do you and your companies leverage it? I've been around. Name is Sonny Marshall. I'm president of Marshall Communications. After spending 20 years and about 9 months on active duty in the Air Force, working space communications. Last job was at the Joint Chiefs, working military satellite communications. I decided to get out and start my company. Nobody told me at that time that I should probably go work for somebody, so I just started it on the very next day after retirement. So I really never worked for anybody. I've always had my business since 1991, and I'm still standing. So I'm doing something right. I know how to avoid the wolf who's at the door. But no, it all boils down to following the money. My background, basically, you can see it in here. You'll see that each of us have our bios here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. The key there is that I'm in the high-tech side of the business. We're not a body shop, but we are a systems integrator, and we do resell hardware, IT hardware. And that IT hardware covers communication systems all the way up to PCs, desktops, what you name it. And I think it's important that you understand that because when you take a look in this era of sequestration, that there's a lot of things that are limited, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But that's a little bit about me. I'll turn it over to Jim Tierney.
Good afternoon, Jim Tierney. I had a 17-year career with the Army as a deputy. Well, finally, at my end stage, was a deputy program manager for a variety of field services equipment systems. I went into industry in '97. I was director of business development for Arthur D. Little Consulting Company, and then stayed on as government business development for another company called TIAX, a technology development company, and then eventually went into consulting to government contractors on my own, which I've been doing since 2005.
I am Pete Proctor. Went in the Army for 2 years, got out 35 years later, but here I am out of the Army for the past 10 years. First 2 years I served as a chief operating officer for a small logistics IT company, and then I opened my practice for consulting for the past 8 years. And I'm doing a variety of things from products to services, and latest has been in the cyber world.
Okay, well, at lunch, you heard our speaker talk about the top 100 companies and what they did and how things have been pretty tough over the last 2 or 3 years with a bottoming out last year, and he's thinking about looking how things are coming up. One of the things that I did in getting and prepared for this discussion was I took a look at, instead of looking at companies, I looked on the other side at the government. I looked to see what's been happening. And when you go back a few years, you'll see that GWACs and MACs, government-wide acquisition contracts and multi-agency contracts, a little bit different there. You will find that what has happened is that they've been going up and down. They've been in and out of favor for a while. But I did notice that the top 20 opportunities in 2014 was $160 billion with a B dollars. Now you heard Mr. Wakeman at lunchtime talked about what was awarded to the top 100 in 2013 was 102. Okay, and so what I'm saying is the opportunities are growing, and in 2013 the opportunities was 68.5 billion. Half of the top 20 opportunities in 2014 are IDIQ. So that's approximately, if you take a look at that, those 20, it's 99 billion, approximately. Okay, opportunities. And if you take a look closely, you'll see that professional services of that 160 was about 73.2 billion possibilities in 2014. Okay, the average in 2013, the average professional service award was 7.3, and I'm talking about not awards, but opportunities in the contract vehicles was 7.3 billion. The average IT opportunity was 14.6 billion. Just a few numbers I put out there for you. As a little bit of background, you hear thrown around a lot Klinger-Cohen. Klinger-Cohen came out, it's an act that Congress did, okay? And it has to do with acquisition. In 1996, it basically replaced and renamed the IT Management Reform Act and also the Federal Acquisition Reform Act, okay? Basically, it shifted the focus from IT acquisition management, I repeat that, IT acquisition management, to IT investment management and information resources management, as well as IT management itself, okay? It established for the first time CIO positions in every one of the agencies. This was in 1996. So when you hear about all the CIOs and things like that at different agencies, Klinger-Cohen brought that into effect. But the thing that impacts us today is that the Klinger-Cohen Act authorized the Office of Management and Budget to authorize executive agents to manage these government-wide acquisition contracts. And they have only authorized 3 executive agents, okay? GSA, and you're familiar with that, the GSA vehicles and things like that. NASA, through the SOUP contract, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, and NIH, National Institutes of Health. It's only 3 executive agents. So there's a lot of other multiple agency contracts out there, whether it's Eagle or STARS and all these things. But those are MACs, okay? Those are not government-wide acquisition. It turns out that the GWACs are a subset of the MACs, okay? That's really what it is. Generally, a MAC is basically put out there by a single agency for other agencies to use. But what Klinger-Cohen did was it got pretty upset. So Klinger-Cohen decided to go on and make play special attention on IT, and they initially put IT in there so that the GWACs could be interagency as well as multiple government-wide acquisition on one vehicle. The key thing is that you got each one of these agencies have to go in and actually pay a fee for using it, okay? In 2005, and that was 1996, in 2005, the GAO said GWACs were high risk, and they fueled rapid spending growth without a lot of oversight, okay? So it kind of went down. 2012, the Office of Federal Procurement Policy ruled that any agency that wanted to issue a MAC must submit a business case on why it was necessary. And at the same time, the White House backed them up and said, you know, we've got to consolidate, we've got to combine these opportunities, and was forcing people to use existing vehicles. There was too many IT vehicles out there. Kind of turned around last year in 2013, after looking at it very closely and changing some things, the GAO lifted the high-risk tag off of GWACs, and it opened the floodgates again. Not that everybody could use them, but the three agencies, NIH, NASA, and GSA, could do that, but they were really paying close attention on GSA because GSA wasn't really offering what they considered real good customer service to the agencies who used it. So the one thing I just want to add a couple of more things, and I'll pass the baton here. The key thing I wanted to bring up to you, and why I think it's very interesting to small businesses, is the fact that most of these contracts are firm fixed price. Most of them are IDIQ, and you know, the general will probably talk a little bit about that. But what's important here, keep in mind that you normally see single contract acquisitions instead of multiple awards. You see single awards. These vehicles are multiple awards. SOUP, which stands for Solutions for Enterprise-Wide Procurement, is a 10-year, 120 months period of performance, okay? $20 billion award contract limit per award, 20 billion, okay? It's IDIQ. That's SOUP 5, okay? SOUP 4 it was a 7-year one, and it averaged about $2.4 billion a year being placed on it by all agencies across the board. The new SOUP 5 submission was this past December, and they're intending to change the balance. They're now focusing on small business. So they're going to award about 15 large contracts and 20 to 30 small business, okay? 20 to 30 small business contracts on that. CIOCS is the National Institutes of Health, their contract vehicle. Just like it stands for Chief Information Officer, Commodity Services, okay? That's a 10-year again, 20 billion. Now that 10-year is a 5-year plus another 5-year option period. Again, that one's going to be 10 to 15 awards large, 30 to 40 small business awards are going to be on that one. They're starting to focus them towards small business, okay? Now, the NAICS code is 54159 for the small business, which is a cap of about 25 million. Firm fixed price, IDIQ again. One other one, and I'll let it go, is what they call the ITES 3. It stands for IT Enterprise Solutions. That's being offered by the Army. It has not, the RFP has not come out yet, so there's still time. 9-year, $20 billion again, 10 large awards, 14 small business awards. But that one is veering off a little bit from the other ones. This one's going to have not only firm fixed price hardware, but it's going to have some time and material on it. It's going to have some services. And the one for SOUP and the one for CIOCS will also have what they call commodity enabling services. Installation will be there. Some integration work will be there. Some special engineering, if they have to fit things in, that will be there, okay? So they're starting to open it up to let some service stuff get in there. The CIOCS was due tomorrow. Last night we got an amendment that's going to be due on Monday, so I'll be leaving here shortly after this session to go finish up our proposal for that one. Again, it is huge. Now, That's important for small businesses, guys. All these numbers don't mean anything if you're not on the team or you're not priming it yourself. The key to the key for small businesses is getting a seat at the table. Okay? Getting a seat at the table. Critical, critical, critical. So it's important that you take that. I'll leave any other questions for me for later. General?
Thank you. Now, we should have let me go first because I was going to give definitions. But
Go
Sonny, you have smoked the course, and I thank you for that. You
Sorry
talked
about
about IT, and I didn't go into details. I did a little work at the Defense Logistics Agency, and when I first went there in 1978, they were doing about $17 billion, and today they're doing about $44 billion.
Wow.
Going to a little bit down, but one of the things that has happened is that the commander or the director of DLA has offered to DOD $13 billion in savings. So when you hear the term reverse auctions and
Oh, really?
LPTA, it just tells you that you're in for a rude awakening. And oh, by the way, they're about to put an $8 billion IT contract on the street here in a few days, probably a few months, for IT services and equipment. So just a starter to say, yeah, follow the trace of the money. Now, a few weeks ago,
Is that DLA, sir?
DLA, Defense Logistics Agency. A few weeks ago, Health and Human Services put out an article about their spend for HHS-related services and commodities, and it was something over the next 10 years north of $17 trillion. So, you want to follow the money.
Thank you.
Look at where things are being spent. And Health and Human Services is a huge, huge enterprise.
And they
And of
come under
course-
NIH.
Yes, indeed. And believe it or not, when you start talking about healthcare and Medicare, Medicaid, they go back and audit any purchases for services over $10,000, and they recover over $1 billion each year. Fraudulent and/or excess claims. So it's huge, to say the least. So let's go back to definitions, because I was asked to talk
Good.
about definitions, and then do a little comparison, and then talk about what are some of the drawbacks. I gave you the first two, okay? LTPA and reverse auctions. And third, that Sonny gave you, have a seat at the table. So, the GWAC's government-wide acquisition contract, or a multi-agency contract, there is some difference. First, the GWAC is a contract in which multiple government agencies align their needs and purchases of goods and services using this type of instrument, and you heard who has that authority to do so. These contracts allow for economies of scale, which enables the reduction of per unit costs, and of course, you heard they're normally used to procure new technologies. There are 78 agencies now and several hundred departments in our government that are able to use this instrument. On the other hand, a MAC is a delivery order IDIQ contract that's established by an agency for use by other government agencies to obtain supplies and services. However, the Economy Act, which permits an agency to place orders for goods and services with another government agency when the head of that procuring activity says it's in the best interest of the government, and it's not done to preclude competition in the marketplace. The IDIQ, indefinite quantity, indefinite delivery contracts, is for indefinite goods or services over a fixed period of time. The government entity places delivery orders for supplies or task orders for services against the basic contract for individual requirements. Minimum and/or maximum quantities are specified in the basic contract and/or as expressed in terms of number of units or in terms of services, dollar values, as you just heard earlier. They help these IDIQs help streamline the process, and obviously they are in fact still prevalent because people are trying to reduce procurement administrative lead time. A few years ago, someone in their infinite wisdom decided that for every contract over $1 billion within DOD, there had to be a defense procurement peer review.
Sure did.
And it extended the time, in many instances, by 8 to 10 months. And so when people were buying things such as fuel, and the procurement cycle is 1 year, it basically drove all the small businesses practically out of the bulk fuel sales or purchase capability. And that, my friend, I believe is being corrected as we sit here today. And hopefully we can see that go away, because if I've got a procurement workforce that's competent and capable, why do I need someone who doesn't know anything about that particular channel or vertical to provide oversight? It's just unbelievable, unconscionable, in fact. So, back to the MAC, or the IDIQ. You may not see a small business set aside, and if you do, be careful, because you may go through phase 1, and that is to get inside the wire and be, as we say, have a license to provide those goods or services. But then what may follow is a competition within that that says, now we want to do a reverse auction. And I had a client who didn't read the fine print and decided, man, it's the government. So I'm selling fuel to the government and they don't have to pay excise taxes. Yes, they do. So guess what? Drop the prices and then all of a sudden you're left holding the bag. So just be careful as you go through the process. That one, you know what your main thing is and what you can do and what it costs you to get it done before you sit down and say, gee, I want the business because I feel good about it. It just doesn't work. You heard find a teammate, and what's happening right now within DLA is as we're coming out of Iraq or have come out of Iraq and now are coming out of Afghanistan, those IDIQ contracts that were written a couple of years ago may be terminated because the requirement may either be diminished and they can use other means to acquire these goods, or the quantities just may be reduced. So just keep in mind, as you're participating in these opportunities, things are changing. So remain vigilant. And oh, by the way, that's why most of these agencies, or all of these agencies, have small business advisors. Walk in, go see them, go talk to them, tell them about what's happening in your world, because they may not be as up to date as you are about what you're able to provide. And so I forget the section, is it 29? You're probably more familiar than I, that talks about small business competition. Or is it section 19?
What FAR?
FAR. I think it's section 19, which talks about if there's,
It is.
if there's competition in small business, then they have the opportunity to set aside the business, okay? So my thoughts to you are to remain vigilant. More importantly, understand the rules of the road, and don't hesitate to go see your small business advisors in the areas that you're focusing your sales to. So I'll turn the podium over to Jim, and I'll take your questions.
Thank you, sir. This morning, Charles McCaffrey mentioned in one of his top 10 points that just having a contract with the government, especially these type of contracts, IDIQs, MACs, GWACs, they don't guarantee you anything. They are just a license to hunt. That's a really important point to remember. Small businesses often fall in the trap of thinking that I have a contract and money's going to flow my way. You have to do probably as much, if not more, work after you win a contract to make it work for you. It's like buying a nice car and not putting fuel in the tank. It looks great in the driveway, but it doesn't get you anywhere. Small businesses have hurdles to face. There are historical incumbents typically. You heard about SOUP and some of the other large IDIQ contracts. These things get recompeted every so often. There are companies that have been doing business under these contracts for years, and when you're new to it, the government doesn't know who you are. your prime contractor, if you're on a team, can be your worst enemy sometimes because they don't want to give out work to their subs. They want you on the team because they get points. Once they own the contract, they forget who you are. They don't answer your phone call. There's agency, we heard about the Economy Act, but there's also agency policies about contract offloading. For example, the Army does not like to use GSA schedules.
Sure don't.
Typically, there's an actual agency policy against that. There are internal organizational inertia, and there's your client may not really understand who you are. So there's a lot of things that you have to think about as a small business. So how do you deal with these things to overcome? So we hear these numbers thrown around. SOUP is going to be recompeted with a $20 billion ceiling. Big difference between ceiling and actual awards. SOUP, for example, in the 10 years prior to SOUP 5, awarded only $12 billion over 10 years. A lot of money, but not anything near the contract ceiling. SOUP is actually a pretty interesting contract. It's relatively well spread around. The top contractor for SOUP of that $12 billion I just mentioned has pulled in about $1 billion of that. That's 9%. The top 3 contractors have pulled in 21% of it. The top 6 contractors have pulled in totally combined almost 60% of the total value. Looking at some other ones, the Army's Eagle contract. By the way, there are 52 contractors on SOUP 4. 37 of those have made less than 1% of the total award value. And these trends continue throughout most IDIQ contracts, including GSA schedules. Most of the time, about 50% of the companies that actually have a schedule will make less than 1% of the total award ceiling. The top 6 contractors typically get 90 to 99% of the total awards. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the businesses that spend the time, energy, and resources getting to know the customer, getting the customer to know and understand them, and ultimately provide a value to the government, provide the solution that the problem that they have, those are the people that win. It also means, you heard earlier, the government's risk averse. They're very risk averse. Changing contractors, trying somebody new is risky to them. So you've got to go in and give a really compelling reason why they should go with your solution versus someone else's. So what do you do about all that? You've got to get known. Get in to see your customer frequently. Get them to know who you are. You've got to be responsible for your own success. If you're on a team, make sure before you sign that teaming agreement that it gives you the right to go hunting without the prime contractor being there in front of you. And make sure you get the right in that contract when you have your final agreement and your subcontract that if you get the work, it comes to you. So the prime contractor can't take it from you. You've got to stand out. Be different than the other people. If you're an also-ran or a me too on a team, you're not going to get the work. Be different from the prime contractor. Have a compatible and complementary service, but not the same. If they can do the work, they will try to keep it in. They've got a huge affordable, they've got a huge amount of people to keep employed. They're going to take care of their people first, especially when dollars contract. You have to be responsive. If the government does call you and says, hey, we need a white paper, get it to them as quick as you can. Don't wait weeks. It should be days, if not a day. You have to be affordable, of course, but ultimately, you've got to be the solution provider to the problem that they have, not what you're trying to sell. And I'll just leave you one parting thought before we take questions. Don't chase contracts that you can't perform on and can't win. Bid and proposal money, your investment in getting a contract, capture planning, and writing that proposal is an investment. Pick your investments wisely. Writing a proposal because you can do the scope if you haven't even been in front of the contractor to the government client to explain to them who you are and what you do is just a waste of money. You're tossing your investment away. Thank you.
Okay, so you've heard what they are. You heard what you need to do when you get a seat at the table. And it's important that we keep that in mind. One thing I'd like to add to what the general had said was about the IDIQ was in that indefinite delivery, it's kind of interesting because when they put that cap on it, that cap is there for a reason, and they were able to spend end-of-year money pretty quickly. So if you do have access to a vehicle, this time of year, between now and the end of September, is the time when a lot of money becomes available, and they're looking to spend it. And if you have a vehicle, that's exactly what they want and need. It's not enough time in these few months remaining to come up with a new acquisition or a new contract or what have you. So if you do have access to it, that's one way to work it. But the only way to do that is, like Jim was saying, you got to talk to your customer. You got to know that they need something. A lot of times, customers are looking to check the block for small business. And so, yes, they've got people who are primes, but they may not be small business, okay? But if you are a small business prime on a specific contract, people need to know that. People need to know that. So, I mean, there's a lot to be had. There are some risk, but the key thing there, though, is you don't have any chance, any probability, if you're not trying and you're not on a contract. Today, we're talking about multiple awards versus single awards. There are, with sequestration and the continuing resolution, there are practically no new programs. So what are they going to be doing? They're going to be sustaining what they've got. And that's across the board. So as people are sustaining what they've got, they're going to be trying to at least have the same budget, if not 10% less than they did last year. And they're going to be supplying and resupplying. So from an IT perspective, you need to be able to do some very, very cost-effective bidding. With that, I'd like to open it up because there's a lot of questions that could be asked here, folks. We only touched just a little bit of the top of this iceberg. But if you're out there and you don't have access to a GWAC, you haven't been on a MAC, it's critical because the competition begins once you get a seat at the table. Let me repeat that. The competition begins once you get a seat at the table. We've been on a MAC down at Spar for quite a while, and it took a long time before we were able to win because now you're competing with the people who have a seat at the table. Now that's your competition. So now we've got to beat them at what they do, and you've got to have low indirect rates. You've got to have low rep rates. Whatever they're buying, the government is still looking for low price. Okay, and I don't know if the general can talk about it, but that reverse bidding, that is amazing. That is something else. How many have heard of that reverse bid thing? You might want to. The reverse
auction.
Auction, yeah. Oh man.
The process is basically it's done over the internet, and you're told here's the going-in price, and you get a screen that tells you here's what the latest price is. Can you beat it? And you get so many seconds to respond. And if you're not paying attention, yes, ma'am. Maybe you know better than I do. But go ahead.
It is.
It is.
Is it?
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. Oh, yes. So just be cognizant of the fact that people are looking for a way to get that price as low as possible. And if you're not careful, you'll just go beyond. So use the eBay model. I love it.
Actually, one other point on that, you'll find that your competitors will sometimes be doing it to drive your price down intentionally to hurt you. They don't care if they win this or not. It's strategically they want to put your price down to a point where you can't provide the service any longer.
And then they can get the contract later on. Or you find yourself competing against yourself in some instances. Because you don't know who's in the other room, so to speak.
Questions? Comments? Everybody here is, yeah, go ahead.
I do have a question, but not specifically the subject matter. I was just curious from before, do you go by James or Jim?
Jim.
Jim, okay. You made a comment earlier, and I think that Dr. Page also, that you don't do prime contracts, you want to do subcontracts. So I just wanted you to expand on that. You made that comment earlier in the day, if I recall correctly. Do you remember saying that? So I was just curious as to why.
Well, it like everything else, it depends. if you ultimately you'd like to be a prime contractor to control your own destiny, but often it's hard to if you haven't had the past performance. And these large IDIQ contracts, unless there's a set-aside portion, you can't be a prime contractor as a small business unless they specifically set aside a certain number of the awards. So you've got to be a subcontractor. There are some advantages to being a subcontractor. You don't have to. You don't have the burden of carrying all the investment costs for the proposal. Some of these some of these billion-dollar MACs and GWACs can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars or even more to bid on. And so you want to be on a team, if you can, to get to ride in there and not have to put all that investment in. So there are times when being a subcontractor is the right thing to do, but you don't make you'll make more money ultimately being a prime if you can. Does that answer your question? Or?
That was my point. I was just curious as to the commentary behind it, so thank you for doing that.
And one comment to clarify, we do not work for the government even through prime. So that we will not do subcontracting work either for the government.
Oh, I'm sorry. Were you referring to when I was emulating? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, it's. I apologize. No, I'm sorry. The reason I said that is you can't play both sides of the fence. If I'm going to advise a company who's working for the government, I can't also be a government contractor. It's a conflict of interest.
Right.
Professionally. Sorry, I misunderstood your question. I'm sorry.
But most of these big contracts that are coming out, they do list, and they're focused now on awarding small business awards. And they let you know what the NAICS code is. So if in this one case, 54159 was for both the ITES 3 as well as the CIOCS, and that's $25 million cap. Now they could have said 150 people. It's either people or revenues over the last 3 years.
Right.
But they said 25 million. So that limits it just to those people who will be awarded. And you would be, your proposal is thrown out the door if you don't let them know your social economic status and the revenue that you have to prove that you're doing, okay? So it's critical. And to me, that opens the door for small businesses to at least try to get in. If you don't have past performance, it will hurt you. I'll tell you that now. Go ahead.
Regarding those businesses, the small businesses participating in the marketplace, what do you think is happening with mentor proteges and being able to have that?
Can't hear you. Is there any way we can?
Mentor proteges, those relationships, you're talking about teaming and collaborating, but what do you think is happening with those mentor protege agreements in the marketplace? So small businesses can get population and past performance and maybe JV or team. How do you see that playing out right now? Is that still?
I don't know, they may have different views than I do, but it's basically run by each agency. Each agency has their own Office of Small Businesses and they competition advocate, and then they will push hard or push softly their mentor protege requirements within that agency. And I think that you have to look at that and see what's going on. Myself, you hear a lot about it, but I haven't really seen a lot of success stories that you can speak about. But you guys go on and.
I agree with that. It's agency specific, and it varies by agency and or individuals, just how great that mentor is about doing it. And I was in a company that had a mentor protege, and we didn't get a go at this station, believe it or not. Not that easy.
You had a question?
On the large GWACs, and the MACs,
Yeah.
what is the frequency or cycling of on-ramping? I mean, I'm assuming that if there is a small track and you're doing successful at it, you're going to graduate out of your NAICS perhaps sooner than it's a 10-year contract. Hopefully, you're going to graduate out of the NAICS well before the 10 years. Can you talk a bit? I've been trying to figure out how to get onboarded on a couple of different.
Well, quite a few of them. I know SOUP has on-ramps, so does the CIOCS from NIH has an on-ramp capability, but there's a cutting-edge sword. They have off-ramps too. And the off-ramp comes when you don't do anything, and they have a certain limit that you have to do. As a matter of fact, GSA has off-ramp.
Yeah.
If you're not doing a certain amount of business, they'll kick you out of GSA. Seaport E is the same way.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, so you have to look into it. Each one's, the timing of it changes depending on who the contracting officer is for that particular GWAC. And they call them master contracting officers versus the agency contracting officer of the one who's using it. So it's the master one that goes off on the own.
Any additional tips or advice as to how to approach that?
I would,
Get on a team and then work from the team over to your other board, or?
well, I mean, to me, you've got to, every single one of these GWACs, I mentioned 3 big ones, every single one has, the large guys have to have a small business subcontracting plan. They all have to. You need to contact these people. And every website, they tell you who the incumbents are. And in every website, you know, especially FedBiz Up, things like that, they tell you who the interested bidders are. You need to be getting out there, sending emails out saying, here's who we are. We're interested in being a sub. Telling people what your capabilities are, what you bring to the table. You got to bring something to the table. If you know, you may not be able to do all the stuff that the GWAC wants, but if you do something really well, that's mentioned in what the GWAC is looking for, say that that large company will at least get a check mark for that particular block. And then you go out and find something and bring it back to the table so that you can basically, if you shoot it, you eat it type of a thing. You guys agree?
I agree. The thing that you see is there may not be the kind of teeth in that small business plan.
It's true.
And that can get you in trouble. So be sure to look very carefully at that. And I'm familiar with one in the fuel business over DLA, where it's almost as if, you know, smack on the hand if you don't have small business.
If I could just add to that, with prime contractors on these large contracts, they do have to have small businesses, and they're supposed to award a certain percentage. But they also have small business liaison officers. You know, a company like Raytheon and Lockheed, they have their own internal small business offices that you can go and approach to learn about how they're using the contract. But at the end of the day, you're one of every other small company in the world trying to get on their team. And so what you've got to do is show them how you're going to help them win.
Bingo.
You've got to show them why you're important to their winning the contract. And usually that means you've got to get in front of the customer and have the customer want you.
Are these primes able to add additional subs after the contract is awarded? Are they able to add to these GWACs, add you onto the team after?
Yes, they are. It's just that they, you know, what's the incentive? You got to bring something for them, right? Yes. They're not going to do it because you look good or you dress really nice. You got to.
I just meant in general, because some contracts I thought you go with the team that you won with. My only point was, even though you didn't win with that team, you bring capability later. It's fairly easy for them to add you to those GWACs later.
Absolutely.
But those are governed by the on-ramp and off-ramp procedures. Every contract is specific about how that works, the timing, the process, the procedures, the requirements. So it's not just, you can't just show up and say, I want to be on your team.
Any other questions, comments? So everybody knows all about GWACs and MACs, right? Everybody's going to be on somebody's team. Or the one that's still out, I mean, if you don't subscribe, and I'm not trying to get you to subscribe to any particular capability, but the GovWin Deltec folks put out summaries regularly about certain areas. And one of the things that they do at the beginning of every year is talk about the opportunities for that year. And then throughout the year, they give you a summary for every major thing that's coming out that you might be concerned with. It's critical that you stay on top of that. And once you get that information, like to me, the one that's still open is iTest 3 from the Army. You know, that's the one that they're going to be buying computer hardware. And, you know, it's mandatory that the Army buy computer hardware through that contract and not any of the other GWACs that are out there, because they're all competing. These guys are getting money and fees. They're throwing it away if they go to another contract, okay, to buy that. And the Army buys a heck of a lot of IT computing, networking, and one of the big things on CIO-CS is hosting, virtual data centers, virtual hosting. That's so critical these days. Everywhere you go, everybody's got something in the cloud. Well, the cloud is part of the CIOCS, as well as SOUP. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, one of the things small businesses have to watch out for in those types of contracts is the ease with which you can slip into this ball of false tactics. I just got on an IDIQ. I just got on a multi-billion-dollar GWAC. Well, what does that really mean to you? Okay? Yeah, you got on it. Now you got a chance to go to the dance. But does that mean you're going to get any work? Have you made the mistake of building your pipeline based upon the fact that you got on a $1 billion IDIQ? Because that's a false pipeline. You haven't really won anything yet. Okay? Are you trying to market to a lender the fact that you just got on a multi-billion-dollar GWAC? That lender's not stupid. He knows you haven't won anything yet. Okay? He knows you still have got to compete for the task orders and on and on and on in order for you to bring in any kind of real money. So you don't want to get caught into that sort of malaise of thinking just because you got onto one of these things, you've actually are successful. No, you are partially successful. You haven't won the race yet. You just got around the first half. Okay? Now you got to go out and win something. And now this goes back to my earlier comments. Relationships, knowing your customer. And this time, customer as a corollary is also your prime, if you happen to be a subcontractor. You got to know these people. You've got to establish the relationships. Primes aren't going to give you spaces on that contract if you aren't, for want of a better term, in bed with that guy or gal, okay? If you aren't always in their face, if you aren't paying attention to what's going on so that when they have a problem, somebody screws up, one of the other contractors is got a bad egg in the bunch and they got to get off the site, you aren't right there to be able to fill that slot, okay? I mean, you have got to work it. And something that a lot of people don't think about sometimes when you look at these PMs that you're trying to hire, maybe the best qualifications are people skills. Not technical skills, people skills. Because at the end of the day, the front line is that PM in the face of that customer, in the face of that prime, trying to get the business, trying to be responsive, trying to establish a relationship so that the next time something comes up, oh, I got some more spaces, I got some more money, I can hire some more people, they're more likely to think of you as opposed to some other person.
The only thing I'd like to add, not only people skills, but an entrepreneurial capability. As you said, it's managing the people, but it's also managing the project to run it profitably. So, just like you say, so many people look at a PM as being technical. He needs to have a technical background often, but he's got to be an entrepreneur to be able to manage the project, the people, and do it profitably.
Totally agree.
So if you guys are going to follow the money, you heard what we've talked about here. You've heard how you've got to start being proactive, and what Craig just mentioned is very, very important about once you get a seat at the table, you still got to work it. It's a people-to-people relationship that has to be worked. Knowing your small business office, knowing who some of those folks are, knowing your prime is critical. But all of that said, what are you bringing to the table? You got to ask yourself, look in the mirror, what are you bringing? Are you just bringing yourself and you can write? Okay, then you're a consultant. Can you do anything else? One of the things, you talk about primes and mentors and protege. One of the things that we've done with this organization, GBNA, and I wasn't here earlier and I haven't heard anybody talking about GBNA, but one of the things I try to do as one of the senior members in the group was try to work with small businesses that were younger than myself. We're still small, we're less than 25 million, but at the same time, I reach out and I try to work with small businesses to help me with a lot of the things that I'm doing, some of the stuff I'm doing inside with my portal, with PowerPoint, not PowerPoint, SharePoint. Okay? We got people out there who know all kinds of IT things. Key concepts. We're working with key concepts, and those folks try to work with other people to do some of my IT. I've outsourced my IT. In order for me to be competitive, I didn't keep 5 or 6 people on staff. I got rid of all those people last year. I downsized my total square footage from about 10,000 square feet all the way down to about 7,000 or 8,000 square feet. I went from like 20 down to about 8 to be competitive, following the money. Okay, because those big guys, they're going to be competing with me, but I can live with 1% profit. I can live with a 0.5% profit. Can they? Can you? Think about it. Think about it. And those are different types of questions that people on the other side with the body shop, and those are good things too, because you got a lot of people out there that are doing the people thing. And there you got to play different games than the people do who are working with the hardware. And I would love to get into the energy and the oil business and things like that, because I guarantee you the government buys a lot of oil and a lot of gasoline. And they buy a lot of vehicles, and they buy a lot of tires, and you name it, they're buying it. DLA does, I'm sure, does all kinds of things. But you've got to pursue it. I don't know if you guys knew anything about DLA before today, but it should open up. Find out what's going on. I'm going to find out. I understand just from listening here today that DLA is getting ready to come out with a big contract in the next week or so, 2 weeks. Let's find, you should find out about it and get a group of people together and try to go after it. If you can't go after it yourself, put a group of small businesses together that can.
Keep in mind, those kinds of contracts get delayed, so don't be alarmed if it gets pushed to the right a little bit, okay? So just be aware.
If you don't do anything else, if you don't do anything else, respond to an RFI. Please, please, please. The only way the small business advocate in any of these agencies are going to be able to set something aside for small businesses, whether it's veteran-owned or whether or not it's women-owned, hubs-owned, whatever, you've got to respond to the RFI. If they don't have 2 or more viable companies coming back to them on that market research, it will not happen.
Right.
You can sit there all day and talk, but what are you going to do if you don't respond to that RFI? You got to do that. It doesn't make any sense. And by the way, one of the ladies that was here last year at this conference, a small business from NGA, I got involved, started talking, and I'm slowly getting my clearances above the top secret level to get into NGA. But I went to an NGA industry day last week, and NGA's just flat out said they don't do LPTA. And you should have heard the uproar and everybody clapping. They do not do LPTA because they know they're not going to get the value that they need. NGA, National Geospatial, okay, Agency. Anybody got any other questions? I think we're getting close, huh, Craig? Yep. We're over? All right, thank you, everybody.